Hello everyone, welcome all of you to today's class of AKTU MOOCs lecture. I am Rosalind Mishra, Assistant Professor, ITS College of Pharmacy. Today I shall be dealing with our environmental sciences subject. So, in this subject I will be dealing with unit 2, that is ecosystems. In our previous classes we had already discussed about structures, concepts, types of ecosystem, etc. In today's class we shall be dealing in detail about ecosystem specific to desert ecosystem. Now, coming about desert ecosystem, we shall be learning about introduction of desert ecosystem, types of desert ecosystems, structure and function of the desert ecosystem. So, now without further ado, let us move on further. Desert is the sum of biotic and abiotic processes across all arid regions. Biotic and abiotic includes all kinds of bacteria, animals and plants which are interacting with each other for their survival in a desert habitat. Desert region is affected by multiple factors as mentioned and hence forces the ecosystem to adapt to these changes. The main biotic processes included in the desert ecosystem are plants and animals and the way they interact with each other. Apart from different climate, same biotic processes still have capability to grow. In desert area, plants are known as xerophytes, which means they can survive for a long period without water. Some examples are cactus or barrel cactus, poppy flowers and saguaro cactus. These are a few examples of xerophytes. Now, what are xerophytes? These are plants that can survive for a longer period without water. Now, let us look into the characteristics of deserts. Deserts are characterized by the following ecological factors, namely sandy soil and a rocky substratum. Sandy soil and a rocky substratum. They have scanty rainfall and high amount of evaporation. The weather in a desert is either very hot or it is extremely cold. Apart from this, prevailing wind action also affects the life in desert. Poor soil moisture and poor water resources are other characteristics of a desert. Now, let us learn the geomorphology of a desert. Desert, how are they created? Deserts are created by changes in climate and accumulation of sands and other rocky wastes. A high proportion of the desert floor is an erosion due on the surface of a bedrock. Sand covers about 10 to 20%. Sand covers about 10 to 20% of the desert. The rest of the land consists mostly of gravels, boulders, mountains and various other types of soils. Irrespective of our common notion that desert is mainly made up of sand, no. Desert is not only made up of sand, it is also made up of other constituents like boulders, gravels, mountains and other types of soils. A desert landscape includes various landforms which are created by wind erosion. Just now we had discussed a characteristic feature of desert is direction of wind. Okay. Wind erosion is a very common factor which is seen in a desert. In the heart of the desert, the wind has a free play. Wind erosion creates mounds of sand dunes and flat topped hills, also known as mesas and buttes. The sand bodies of deserts are always on rolling motion due to the prevailing action of wind. Unlike common land masses, the desert plains, they keep changing due to the action of winds. Sand drifts, centric dunes or barchans, loases and longitudinal dunes, sand sheets, these are a few names which are wind-borne geomorphologic features. Okay. So, naming them again, wind-borne geomorphologic features which are seen in a desert are namely sand drifts, crescentic dunes or barchans, loases and longitudinal dunes and sand sheets. These are the geomorphological features or geomorphological characteristics of a desert which are due to the action of winds. Now, one of the most remarkable feature of desert dunes is their power of collecting all the sand from their neighborhood. Now, I have tried to collect a few pictorial representatives of the geomorphological features which are characteristic to a desert. As I just told you all, the first one here is a barchan landform. This landform is formed again due to the action of winds. These are transverse dunes. These are a few structures of the transverse dunes. Here we have a desert loess. Now, we move on further. Now, what are sand dunes? Dunes are large piles of wind-borne sands reaching a maximum height of 250 meters above the surface. Dune shows many shapes and patterns that change continuously due to highly active winds. Deserts are considered to be highly dynamic geomorphologic features, that is, they keep changing. The rate of change is high in case of deserts. Dunes are characterized by two-sided slopes, one along the windward direction and the other along the leeward direction. Okay. So, here I have tried to show you all a pictorial representative of sand dunes. Here if you can see, this one with the sand in transverse direction is a barchan dune. Here we have linear dunes. This is an example of parabolic dunes. Here these are star shaped dunes. Star shaped dunes. Next we have barchan dunes which are becoming transverse. Barchan dunes which are going towards transversal direction. So, known as barchan dunes. Next, after looking into the geomorphologic features of a desert, let us learn about the soils or the types of soils in a desert. Soils in a desert region are generally fertile but lacks moisture due to so that it does not encourage plant growth. Generally, the soil which has moisture in it, they encourage plants growth, but the soil in a desert are generally fertile but they do not contain enough moisture. Temperature in deserts. Talking about the temperature in the desert, climatologically deserts are the hottest places in the world because they absorb more heat from the sun than any other lands in humid climates. Deserts are mostly under arid to semi-arid climates, that is, the moisture content in the atmosphere is also low. Okay. The temperature varies during day and night. There is a lot of temperature difference in between daytime and the night time. In summer, desert temperatures often reach up to 38 degrees Celsius during the day and they drop up to 25 degrees Celsius during the night. During the winter, the temperature in the desert ranges from 10 to 21 degrees Celsius. Clouds would reflect much of the sun's intense radiation during the day, slowing the rate of heating of the air near the surface, whereas at night clouds and water vapor would absorb much of the earth's radiation, most of which consists of infrared rays, slowing the rate of cooling. But winters are much colder in the middle latitude, semi-arid areas and deserts. After talking about the temperature difference between day and night, summer and winter, let us move on to another very important climatic feature, which is rainfall. Rainfall over the deserts. Rainfall is a determining factor of a desert. Rainfall is very scanty in all desert regions. In spite of this, deserts are not barren. They have floral vegetation present. Now, characteristics that are common to all the deserts include irregular rainfall of less than 250 millimeters every year, very high evaporation, often 20 times the annual precipitation, and low relative humidity and clouds all over. Most of the deserts receive less than 200 millimeter rainfall per year. However, the amount of rainfall may vary greatly from year to year. A desert may not receive any rain for several years, and in some cases about 250 millimeter of rain might fall within only a few hours. So, this is how rainfall as a characteristics changes in a desert. Now, after discussing about the climatic features like temperature and rainfall, now we move on over what are the major kinds of deserts, what are the different types of deserts. The distribution of arid regions or deserts is determined by the climate and topography. Based on these two factors and terrains, they are subdivided into tropical deserts and topographic deserts. So, based on two factors, namely climate and topography. Two factors, namely climate and topography. These two factors governs the type of deserts. These two factors govern the type of deserts. So, what are the two types of deserts? Tropical deserts and topographic deserts. So, what are tropical deserts? Tropical deserts have a big diurnal temperature range and very high daytime temperature, whereas the mid latitude deserts have a wide annual range and much lower winter temperature. In the Mongolian desert, for example, the mean temperature is below freezing point for almost half the year. Heat enhances evaporation over the deserts. Moving on to the topographic desert, the topographic controls on desert formation also reflects a deficiency in rainfall. Topographic deserts are located near the center of the continent, where climates are hot in summer and cold and dry in winters. These regions are typically far from the ocean and most often are cut away from rain bearing winds and high mountains. So, these are the topographic deserts, mainly located in the central area of the continent, so that they are far from the ocean and they are away from the wind bearing high mountains. Now, based on two characteristics, that is climate and topography, deserts were divided into tropical deserts and topographic deserts. Based on their surface forms and soil composition, deserts can also be classified into rocky desert, stony deserts, sandy deserts and clayey deserts. Okay. So, this difference is dependent upon what? Dependent upon soil composition and surface forms. Deserts are divided into rocky deserts, stony deserts, sandy deserts and clayey deserts. Now, what are rocky deserts? Rocky deserts have uneven topography between mountain ridges and groups of small hills. Mountain ridges have rugged summits and crests. They have steep slopes with outcrops of rocks. Talus and scree debris are numerous on the hillsides. They are not completely devoid of vegetation. They are isolated small and large shrubs. They can be located on the lower part of the slopes. In valleys and depressions, small shrubs are generally located in the lower part of the slopes, valleys and depressions. Some water springs might appear on the valley floors. So, these are the vegetations, these are the characteristics of rocky deserts. So, with the help of this image, we can understand the characteristic, we can understand the topography of a rocky desert. Now, moving on to stony deserts. Stony deserts are completely flat or gently undulated areas with stones of rocky wastes comprising of sharp edged rock fragments or pebbles. There may not be any vegetation and water here. Sahara and Arabian deserts are stony deserts. Moving on to sandy deserts. Sandy deserts are areas of loose sands which forms hillocks in the shape of barkhans and dunes. These are characterized by uneven surface of undulating chains of dunes with isolated short valleys or hollows with very little vegetation. They resemble sea waves, they look like waves in a sea. Barkhans reach a height of 200 meters. It is difficult to walk straight across on these zones. One has to climb the crests and descend the troughs or hollows. It is easier to walk aided by wind. Sandstorms are very common, creating an atmospheric haze. Moving on to clay desert. Clay deserts are not extensive. The clay floors are cracked into polymorphic or polygonal sections. Soil is of fine silt in composition with sparse vegetation. The clay deserts are mostly saturated with salts. So, with the help of a few pictorials, I have tried to show you the characteristics of all these deserts. Stony deserts, here we have a sandy desert and this is a clay desert. Now, let us look towards the third classification of a desert. Deserts are classified based on geographic conditions. The geographical classification of desert also include continental desert, example Gobi desert, rain shadow deserts due to all mountain ranges, example Judean desert in Israel, coastal desert, example Atacama desert in South America, Namibia desert of Africa. The fourth type is trade wind desert, example Sahara desert where temperature can go up to 57 degrees Celsius. Next we have monsoon desert, example Thar desert in India. Next we have polar desert, example the dry valley of Antarctica. These are ice free for thousands of years. Extraterrestrial desert, example deserts of other planets like Mars. Next, now after talking about the geography of a desert, climatic features of a desert, types of deserts, let us look into the flora of desert. Desert plants cannot use much water at once and the desert soil cannot absorb all of it. Most of the water runs off, carrying away the soil particles. Most desert plants are drought or salt tolerant, such as xerophytes. Some store water in their leaves, roots and stems. Other desert plants have long tap roots that penetrate the water table. They anchor the soil and can control erosion. The stems and leaves of plants can lower the velocity of sand carrying winds and protect the ground from erosion. Now, what are the different types of plants? 3 life forms of plants can be identified. The annuals. Number 1, the annuals. These are the plants which avoid droughts by growing only when there is adequate moisture. The second type is the succulents, such as the cacti, which stores water and survive. The third type is the desert shrub, which has numerous branches with small and thick leaves such that they can store water. Adaptation to desert environment and arid climate involves the ability to avoid wilting and remain dormant for a long period of time rather than an increase in transpiration efficiency. Desert soils are infertile, they lack human and generally grey or red in color. Deserts cannot support the abundant plant and animal life as found in humid climates, but many kinds of plants and animals thrive in deserts for sure. The types of plants which can survive in deserts are date plants, salt loving plants called as halophytes, such as salt bushes grow in areas of highly saline soils and near the edges of playas like dry saline lakes. Xerophytes are drought resistant and survive the remaining time being leafless. All desert vegetation has a highly characteristic spatial distribution. This spacing reduces competition. Some of the types of flora of deserts are creosote bush, sage bush, burr sage and giant cactus. Here we can see the pictures, pictorial representation. Fauna of a desert. Animals of the desert have developed special body structure and ways of life that enables them to survive under extreme heat. Here are an example of few animals like scorpions, dry eagles, etc., centipedes, which can survive the harsh climate of a desert. Camels are an important mammal in a desert which acts as a ship of desert. They can store water for a long time. Human population in deserts, human population are equally facing the same issue. Deserts do not support a large number of people in their regions. People living in desert region must adjust to the local and prevailing hot and dry climate. Deserts are rich in minerals and other natural resources, for example, gypsum, sodium nitrate, sodium chloride salts, borates, etc. Many metallic and non-metallic mineral resources are also obtained from the desert zones. So, with this description, we end our today's class about desert ecosystem. Let us await the next class. Thank you.